everyone, and welcome to CineMania. I'm your host, Cody Higginbotham. If you're tuning into this episode and tune into any further episodes, consider yourself a Cinemaniac. This will be a podcast all about stuff cinema-related, whether it be movies, TV shows, or maybe even other podcasts. This will be the podcast for that. On this episode, I'll be giving a brief intro into the sort of stuff you'll be hearing in future episodes, as well as giving a little bit of fun facts about stuff cinema-related. In future episodes, as I previously stated, stuff will be discussed primarily about movies and TV shows, but also some other topics might include musicals, podcasts, or anything cinema-related. Now, even though other topics will be discussed, the biggest focus will definitely be movies. These topics won't just be movies specifically, but they also can include whole franchises. This could include a trilogy in a franchise, or the franchise as a whole. Some episodes will even be discussions on a single film. For example, in one episode, we could be discussing the entire original Star Wars trilogy, while in another episode, we could just be talking about the first ever Star Wars movie, Star Wars: A New Hope. That's a general idea of what you'll be hearing in future episodes to come. In most episodes to come, I'll be with fellow guests talking about these certain cinema-related stuff. For this episode, I'll just be giving you some fun facts and trivia about movies as a whole. When movies first started, they were primarily silent films, with dialogue just being written out on the screen and some music played throughout the scenes. However, that all changed in 1927. In that year, the movie The Jazz Singer was released, and it became the first ever movie to have audible dialogue, or in other words, it became the first talkie feature. In fact, the first ever line that was physically spoken and heard in that movie, and in cinema as a whole, was the line, "Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet."
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet.
The following year, in 1928, an even bigger thing for cinema came. It was the first ever Academy Awards. That year, the first ever film to win the Oscar for Best Picture was the 1928 film Wings. And then, the first film with talking and audible dialogue that won Best Picture was the following year, with the 1929 film The Broadway Melody. While most films back in the day were primarily in black and white, it wasn't until a few years later that color entered into the films. And the first film with color that ever won Best Picture was the 1939 film Gone with the Wind. Speaking of the Oscars, there's also a lot of interesting fun facts, trivia, and milestones about Best Picture winners as well. For example, in 1974, The Godfather Part 2 was the first ever sequel to win Best Picture. The Godfather, in 1972, also won Best Picture. Furthermore, in 2003, The Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King became another sequel to win Best Picture. However, even though the other films, The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers, didn't win, they became the second trilogy to be nominated for Best Picture, after the Godfather trilogy. There are a lot of other amazing milestones in cinema as well. For example, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the first ever full-length animated movie. And then, several years later, Toy Story became the first ever full-length computer-animated feature film. Before that, a lot of computer-animated stuff was primarily shorts. But that all changed when Toy Story entered the big screen in 1995. Interestingly enough, both the shorts and Toy Story itself were all done by Pixar Animation Studios. Other interesting animated movie trivia, along with the Oscars stuff, only 3 films have ever been nominated for Best Picture. Sadly, none of them won, but it's still impressive that they got Best Picture nominated. Those films being Beauty and the Beast, Up, and Toy Story 3. So that's a general idea of what you'll be hearing on CineMania. In podcasts to come, I'll be having some guests on this show, and if any of you listening would be interested in coming on the show and talking about a movie or franchise that hasn't been covered already, Feel free to comment down below and say you're interested. That's all for this podcast. I'm Cody Higginbotham. Have a great day, and stay awesome, CineManiacs.